Hello and welcome to this React beginner tutorial. Here we're going to focus on the basics of React and on understanding it through simple and practical examples. Let's get started. React is a framework used to make websites and is for many the industry standard. Maybe the most important thing about React is the use of components. In this tutorial, we'll be looking at what components are and how to use them in a project. We will be making a simple portfolio website to get an understanding of this topic. For the setup, we will need two things: a terminal like Git Bash and Node.js installed on our computer. We will begin by installing Git Bash. Just go to git-scm.com/downloads and hit the download button. This makes sure we can run our commands for generating our React boilerplate project. Next, we head over to Node, and that is nodejs.org, and download the recommended version. When it's installed, we can do Node Package Manager commands, or npm, on our Git Bash terminal. One of these commands is create React app, which creates our boilerplate code. Move over to your terminal and make sure you are in the correct folder for where you want your project to go in. Then type npx create React app, followed by the name of your app. This could be whatever you like. For me, it's portfolio. This will generate our starter project, so we have something to start with. Navigate into your newly created project by typing cd and the name of your project, and then npm start to start your development server running on localhost 3000, just to see that everything works correctly. And here we can see the logo and everything's fine. So this works correctly. Now let's look at our file structure and our app.js file. It's located in the source folder and app.js. Here we can see the contents is actually all the stuff that we saw on the localhost server. The image with the logo and the title, everything comes from this file. Here you can see the same text displayed. And we don't need this right now, so we can just delete it. Let's make an h1 tag just to confirm that whatever we write here will end up on the localhost page. Just make an h1 tag with the text test. Start up your terminal again by typing npm start. And here we can confirm that the text test is displayed on the screen in the app.js file. So we can just remove this now, and the logo. That is not needed for our project. The app.js file with the function app is where we actually is going to host, you could say, our components. The app function will hold our components and make up our portfolio site. Here you can see the app function. This would now kind of be like a component, because a component is a reusable piece of code. The problem here is that it's not very reusable because it's hard-coded to test. Let's take a look at how our projects should look like. This is an outline of how our website is going to look like, with the navbar at the top, then followed by a header or a hero image. Then we have our projects, and lastly our footer. Let's make a directory for each component our site will consist of, starting with the navbar. Then we will make another directory for our header, followed by a directory for our projects, and lastly a directory for our footer. Now each folder represents a component. Let's start with the navbar. Create a file named navbar.jsx. This is our React file. Begin by importing React from React. Next, we will create a constant named navbar, followed by an arrow function and curly braces. Inside those curly braces, you'll have a return statement with parentheses. The return statement will always return JSX. Finally, we will export our function so it's discoverable by our app.js file. Let's create the JSX inside our return statement. To illustrate how a component is made, we will simply make a div tag. Inside that div tag, just write a test. This is now a component, believe it or not. Maybe the easiest component you can make. Let's render this to the page by hooking it up to our app.js file. How this is done is like treating it like any other JSX element with open and close brackets and the name of a component inside. So for us, it's navbar. And if you find it in the dropdown, you might get lucky and it auto imports, just like this. With this alone, we should see test written on the screen. And here we see test display on the screen, which means our component is connected to the app.js file. Let's continue on our navbar to make it a little bit more like a navbar, so it can stretch across the screen and maybe have a few elements inside of it. So let's make an h2 tag, just call it navbar, and then the second h2 tag and call it portfolio. These texts are totally random, it could be whatever you like, just to illustrate that navbar can have some content. But for now, it's just text stacked up on each other, stacked on top of each other. Now let's make a navbar.css file so we can style the component a little and make it look more like a navbar. In the wrapping div tag, create a class and call it navbar. Class names in React are camel cased with an equal sign and then quotes and then whatever you like to call your class. We can also have a class name for each of our text tags or our h2 tags. Just call them both nav text. so they have the same styling. Move over to your style sheet, type dot and the name of your class, followed by curly braces, and then we'll just add some simple styling. Just make it a flex item, and then width 100%, and then just a background color and height, so it's visible and differentiated from the rest of the page. Here you can experiment a little with what you like, but this is not meant to look pretty. It's just to demonstrate how components look and not how we can style it in the best way. So we'll be cutting some corners here. Now with the nav text, just make a margin so it doesn't get stuck close together. And to use our style sheet, we need to import it. So type import, followed by quotes, and a dot and slash to make it the current directory and the name of the CSS file. This imports our style. And here we can see our navbar fully styled with our beautiful styling. Now let's head over to our header component and make a header.jsx file. This file will look very similar to the navbar file. So let's just begin by importing React from React. Next, we'll create a constant with the name of our component, which is header, equals a parenthesis and an arrow and curly braces. This is called an arrow function, and we need the return statement with parentheses that returns some JSX. This is the content of our component. So we'll just put in an H1 with the title of our page. This can be whatever you like. And then to spice things up a little, we'll add an image tag to add an image. Here you need the source property, and very soon we will import our image here into the source tag. Lastly, you need to export the component, so it's discoverable by the app.js file. Now I have imported our image by just dragging it into our project, and you can see it here. This is a beautiful mountain picture. So now let's include that in our image tag so it displays on the screen. Go to our header file and let's import our image. Here I'm calling it image, but you can call it whatever you like. Now in the source tag, include curly braces. Curly braces makes it possible to write JavaScript in your JSX and in your return statement. So by adding the curly braces, we are able to access the variable name image. Let's head over to our app.js file and include, or import rather, our header component. If you're not as lucky as I am getting the auto import, just do exactly what it says in the import statement there. And here you can see our image and our title. So everything works correctly. Now let's make a CSS file for our header so we can style our image a little, because it looked a little unmanageable. By creating a class name tag and the name of our class name, just like before. Here we'll call it image. There's really no need for a class name for a title right now. Just dot followed by your class name. And then set a height, specific height for the image, and set the width to 100% to stretch across the site. First we need to import our style sheet before any of our styles can work. Just import it, header.css, and now we can see our image being cropped pretty badly, but it functions just like we said. Now head over to your projects folder and create a projects.jsx file. This will be our projects component. And just like before, start with importing React from React. Followed by a constant and the name of our file, which is projects, and then the arrow function, and the return statement. You could write this as a normal function too. This is just ESX syntax. Above the return statement, you can actually write JavaScript, and it will be in scope of the component. We will use this to make an array of projects and then use it in our JSX. First, create a wrapping div tag and then write 3 div tags inside and just write numbers in there just to test. And underneath we need to export our component so we can import it in our app.js file, just like the other components. Projects, and then a closing tag. And here we can just import it manually. Import followed by our file name, or our function name rather, and then our project path, our file path I mean, which is relative to this file. So the directories are in the same at the same level as this file. So we just type dot and slash. And here we can see our numbers that represent our projects. But what if we wanted JavaScript inside those tags? Let's make an array of projects, just an array of strings. The array is called project array, and then you need brackets, and then just write the strings followed by a comma. So project 1, project 2, and project 3. To access the strings in that array, we need to use curly braces again, because we're about to access JavaScript. We're about to use JavaScript rather. Inside, type the name of the variable followed by brackets because it's an array, and then the index of the array. So for the first project, it's the first place of the array, so index 0, and index 1, and index 2. And here we see the name change because we're accessing the JavaScript in our component. Now it's just hard-coded, but this could be coming from some other place and be totally dynamic, I mean. Let's finish up with our footer component. Create a footer.jsx file. And the same routine again, import React from React. Then create a constant with the name of our function, which is footer, followed by an arrow function, curly braces, and return for our JSX. Let's just create a wrapping div tag, which means the div is just wrapping whatever we want inside of it. And the h1 tag just says footer. Let's just preemptively create our class names. Right now we just need one, just call it footer, and let's export our component. This way we can discover it in our app.js file and on any other file for that matter. Now let's import it in our app.js file. The sequence of the files, the components, does actually matter. So the top one will come at the top and the bottom one will come at the bottom. Let's create a style sheet for our footer component. The class name was footer. Let's type dot footer curly brace and then our style. Again, we will be cutting some corners with the styling. Just make it a flex item and set the background color and height and width. Save, and let's take a look. And again, we need to import our style sheet. This is a common mistake that I still do to this day. And there we go. Now we have our footer, our projects, our title, our header and our navbar. So now we can see that our app.js file holds all our components. Our components are sequenced from top to bottom, and they're very simple. So now we have seen that components are actually just pieces of code, and preferably they're reusable pieces of code. So now, if we were to copy any of these components, let's say, for example, the navbar, if we would just write the exact same thing underneath, we are reusing the navbar component. And if we take a look, we will see two navbars. Thank you for watching.